I hope you're all feeling suitably festive. And if you're not, you will be by the end of this. I think we all know in TV that Christmas doesn't officially begin until the Daily Mail has written its story about how many repeats are on BBC Two. That happened last week, so Christmas is definitely on. Our three panellists are here to act as the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and yet to come. Lord Grade, former chairman of the BBC, former boss of Channel 4 and ITV, and the author of the excellently titled memoir, It Seemed Like a Good Idea at the Time. Kate Phillips, controller of entertainment at the BBC, who's overseen some of this year's festive lineup and will be giving us a sneak preview later. And Kate Phillips, reporter and presenter for BBC Click. Kate Russell, sorry, I knew that having two Kates would confuse me. Kate Russell, reporter for BBC Click and a woman who can see into the future. Now, Christmas TV has its traditions that have been around forever, the Queen, Top of the Pops, but the RTS has dug out, should be on the screen, the very first Christmas schedule from the BBC from 1936. You need very good eyesight to see it. But it kicked off with a demonstration of turkey carving by B.J. Holbert. Not sure who B.J. is, but he was number one. A Lonely Christmas in the Arctic by the son of Ernest Shackleton, so there was your comedy. And the best bit, a seasonal tour through the empire. all broadcast to a grand total of 400 households, because that's how many TVs there were in Britain at the time.
Oh, no.
Thankfully, oh, there's BJ.
Yeah.
They got 100% share.
Thankfully, Christmas TV got a bit more entertaining as time went on, and audiences got a little bit bigger. And Michael, we're going to kick off with a clip from what I think remains the highest rated drama of all time on British TV.
Happy Christmas, eh?
Can't beat it.
That's great.
Hands up who remembers watching that on the day. Yes. Tell us about commissioning that Christmas episode.
It was the first Christmas of EastEnders. We launched it, it had dipped off a bit, and then we worked hard and we got it really. And the tabloids discovered that Leslie Grantham had a prison record, etc. So we were all over the tabloids every hour of every day. So the show was well and truly launched. And Julia Smith, the creator of the show, came to see me about Christmas. I was controller of BBC One in those days. And she said, I said, what do you want to do for Christmas, Julia? She said, well, I want to do an hour. I said, that's really boring and predictable. I said, it's a half-hour show. The form works at half an hour. Stretch it out to an hour. I don't fancy that. Her face fell. And I stopped for a minute. I said, I've got an idea, and that's genuinely my idea. I said, what if we do 2 half hours with a cliffhanger in the middle, and we do it in real time? So let's say we do 6 o'clock or 6:30, and then come back at 10, 6 and 10 for half an hour with a cliffhanger in between. And her face just lit up. She said, I wasn't going to tell you the plot, she said, but Den and Angie are going to split up. She said, it's perfect. And that was the result. We got 30 million viewers.
Yeah, I don't think it's ever been bettered, has it?
I doubt it.
You don't want to claim the credit, but why don't you claim it?
I claim the credit for the scheduling, but
Yeah.
not for the creation and the genius that went into creating that show. I mean, that was something else.
And why is it that we like watching soaps at Christmas? I have this theory that it's nice to watch someone who's having a worse family Christmas than you.
Well, it's familiar, isn't it? And the audience sort of knows now that something dramatic is going to happen on Christmas Day. Everybody's going to be at everybody's throats and trying to kill each other, just like at home. And you feel very comfortable with it. And you're seeing people you know. You know, it's familiar territory, but it's kind of, you know, they're saving up something special for you for Christmas. I think that's the secret of Christmas shows, is you've got to have a sense of anticipation. Mm-hmm. If the audience aren't going to anticipate it and then talk about it afterwards, was it good, was it bad? We didn't have social media in those days. You've got to have a sense of anticipation, otherwise it's just not worth doing.
And there has to be some tragedy or something miserable happen, doesn't there?
Something a bit special, yeah. Some big. You don't want a run-of-the-mill episode on Christmas Day.
Or a birth. You tend to get a lot of births.
Oh, you can
Birth is good.
On Christmas
Birth is
Day,
good.
the
Death's
nativity.
good. Death's
Yeah.
good. My favourite Christmas episode story. Can I?
Yes.
This was told to me by Frank Muir, who was head of comedy, God rest his soul, at the BBC. And they just, in the middle of the beginning of the autumn, they had a massive hit with a new show called Till Death Us Do Part. Alf Garnett, Johnny Spade. The show just took off completely unexpectedly. They thought it was good, but they never realised how big it was. And the controller of BBC One, I think probably Paul Fox in those days, rang Frank and said, we've got to have a Christmas episode. So Frank orders, yeah, Johnny Spade will write it. And the producer was an amazing man called Dennis Main Wilson, who, depending on the phase of the moon, you could have a sensible conversation with. When I tell you he had produced the Goon Show on radio, he was the perfect producer for the Goon. Anyhow, he started haunting Frank. Wherever Frank goes, Dennis was there. Could I have a word with you, Frank? In a minute, then. You know, you always, if somebody you avoided. And anyway, eventually, Dennis pins Frank down. He says, Frank, he said, if Frank says, what's the problem? He said, it's the titles. He says, we've got a Christmas special. He says, it's Christmas, he said. And we're still using the titles we used on the pilot. He said, it's just captions just going through on a roller. He said, it's horrible, it's horrible. So Frank said, what do you want to do? He said, well, I've got this fantastic idea, he said. We open the show, he said, with a shot from a helicopter at night of Big Ben. And then without cutting, the helicopter goes down the river, down to the East End, and we see Alf Garnett's house, and the lights on upstairs, and the camera zooms in, no cuts. He said, we zoom in and we mix through into the studio, and there's Alf and the Silly Moo in bed, and we go into the action. So Frank says, that sounds all right. He says, what will it cost? Says Dennis, there's two ways of doing it, he said. He said, we can do it. They won't let you fly a single camera, a single engine helicopter at night. You have to have a twin engine helicopter. He said, we could shoot it day for night. He said, but it'll be horrible, horrible. He said, but we could do a twin engine, he said. And Frank said, all right. He said, how much? He said, £7,000, a lot of money. £7,000. And Frank said, just to get rid of it, all right. Oh, he says, thank you, Frank. Thank you so much, he said, because we've already shot it and it didn't work.
Now, for our second clip, you're going to show us the Queen.
Yes, this, believe it or not, is really, really racy for its time. Stanley Baxter was exceptionally worried about this. Can you really dress up as the Queen around Christmas on television? You know, it was really quite sweaty bum time. So we sort of, he hedged his bets, and he called her the Duchess of Brenda, but it's obviously not. But I hope you like the clip. But we weren't sent to the Tower. We seemed to get away with it.
Great, cut, that's a wrap, everybody. Thanks, love. See you next year, okay?
Just one thing.
Yeah?
Can we discuss my repeat fees?
Racy stuff.
Did you ever get any feedback from the palace?
Yes, did you watch it?
No.
They never admit they've ever watched anything. You know, they won't admit they've seen The Crown or the Queen or anything like that. They never. Of course they do.
I wonder if they all sit around and watch the Queen's Christmas message on Christmas Day. Maybe they do.
Maybe they do. Yeah.
The broadcasters send them all shows. The palace get shows from all the broadcasters.
Do they? What, they send you a list?
Well, everyone sends them a selection of what they think so they get that every year. The palace, all the broadcasters send them all the stuff coming out.
It's a preview, so they see it early.
No, I don't, but they do. They definitely yes, and I know that it's yes. We all send them. So the palace do
I do know from a friend of mine who shall be nameless, who was at Eton, and he was sort of from a landed family, and he used to go to tea at Windsor. He used to get invited occasionally to go, because Eton's just across the bridge from Windsor Castle, and he used to go for tea on a Sunday from Eton, and everything stopped, and a trolley was brought in with the TV on it and an indoor aerial, and they used to have to watch with the Queen the Golden Shot.
No! Brilliant.
Bernie the Bold.
Bernie the Bold, yeah.
Yes, left a bit, stop. Go on.
Well, that kind of life takes us very neatly into our next clip.
This is probably one of the best drama series ever made on British television, certainly by ITV. I had nothing to do with it at all, but I think this is a wonderful example of a Christmas episode of one of the biggest hits of the period, probably the biggest hit on television at the time, which was Upstairs, Downstairs, which is sort of multi-camera Downton Abbey, really.
The ninth day of Christmas, my true love said to me,
9 ladies dancing,
8 maids a milking,
7 swans a swimming.
6 geese a laying.
One day set and light, 2 days shoot the whole thing, an hour.
Wow.
Television, 5 cameras, amazing.
When they tried to bring it back, it didn't really work, did it? Why is that?
Didn't have Alfred Shaughnessy and John Hawksworth to create it. Alfred was the key writer, and John Hawksworth was the genius producer behind it. We used to. John Freeman was our chairman at the time. He was one very cultured man, a wonderful, wonderful man, former ambassador in Washington, High Commissioner in India, and we used to circulate. The directors of the company used to circulate the correspondence, and John Freeman was always picking John Hawksworth up on mistakes of etiquette in the show, and there was an endless correspondence about whether footmen in that period would have been allowed to have a moustache or not, which was unresolved.
Is period drama important at Christmas? Do we like to be transported to a posher world?
If it's good, yes. I think, Dickens is kind of, you ought to have some Dickens. I think what have we got this Christmas? We've got some
Got
Dickens.
Les Mis, haven't we?
Agatha Christie.
No, I don't think Dickens wrote Les Mis.
Yeah. Hercule Poirot has come back, so yes.
No Dickens?
I don't think there is Dickens, actually. No, Agatha
Well,
Christie
usually-
and Les Mis is the big period piece.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Can't wait.
And then we've got a change of pace to go to your 4th clip.
Oh, this. I was quite new I was head of light entertainment at London Weekend. My boss was the man who brought me into television. God bless him. God rest his soul. Cyril Bennett, an absolute genius of television, died very young. And he called me up to his office one day and he said, this is 1976. I was 3 at the time. And he said, I just realised, he said, Christmas, the end of 1976, is the weekend. He said, that's us. He said, we'll be expected to do 1 or 2 things a bit special. He said, you got any ideas? I said, give me a day or 2. So John Curry, I was watching John Curry win the gold medal in the Winter Olympics in January, I think it was, somewhere. And I thought, oh God, we could do an ice show with John Curry. He was huge, taller than Dean of his day. And I went to Cyril, I got an idea. I said, how do you fancy the John Curry Ice Spectacular? Great, he said, go and do it. So I got John Curry, I got John Scofield, God rest his soul, lovely, great director, Norman Main, the choreographer, and we put together this very classy show, which John had transformed figure skating for men into something very balletic. I mean, Torval and Dean were the inheritors of John Curry changed the face of ice skating, and he was a total genius. And we had Peggy Fleming, and we did Debussy, and we did this, that, and the other on the ice at Streatham Ice Rink, and finishing with his Olympic program, which is the Don Quixote music, finishing with a big triple. We had the orchestra on the ice. We had a big sight right around the ice rink, etc., etc. And I'm watching the. I had a link in my office, and I'm watching the last bit, and the clock's ticking because we've got to get out of this ice rink at 5 o'clock. Let the public. And I'm watching, and the slate comes up. It says John Curry Ice Show, Olympic routine, take 39. Fuck me. So I get in the car and I drive to Streatham. By the time I get there, they're on take 44. So I said to Scofield, I said, what's going on? He said, he's just lost it. He said, he's just can't do the triple. He cannot get the triple. He said, without the triple, it's not worth having, you know. Oh, my God. So they wind up for another take, and they've given him whiskey. He's had his feet are bleeding. He's been in tears. So we do take 45. It still collapses. So John and Norman Main come rushing out the scanner, rush through the auditorium, and then, of course, we get to the ice. You sort of You have to creep. And they have a little word with him, and they creep back, rush into the scanner, take 46, a triple. He does it. Everybody's in, the orchestra's in tears. And I said to John, what did you say to him? I said to him, either fucking do it or go home.
Let's watch the clip.
This is take 46. Fantastic. Anyway,
So was that a big hit for you?
We finished the show, edited it, and I went up to see my boss, Cyril. I said, Cyril, I've got it. Here it is, the centrepiece of our Christmas show. Great. He said, a glass of whiskey and a cigarette. We put the cassette in. Remember cassette? Some people remember cassettes.
Yes.
Put the cassette in, and he sat and he watched it all the way through. And the end credits rolled. London Weekend Ident came up, pressed the button, and gave it back to me. He said, Michael, he said, you're allowed one of those in your career. he hated it. I think he thought he was getting Holiday on Ice or something, big spectacular. And we had Stephen Sondheim's side by side with Millie Martin and David Cohen and Julia Mackenzie. It was a very arty-farty show for ITV. Well, I think we lost to the test card on the BBC.
Now, I'll ask you this question. I won't ask these two because they'll be biased. Why do you think the BBC dominates Christmas ratings?
Well, historically, there's no revenue at Christmas for ITV, so we never bothered at Christmas. You didn't want to give away your crown jewels over a holiday period when there's no advertising revenue. So we used to get into trouble with the IBA, who were our masters, the Independent Broadcasting Authority, who used to give us a hard time because we were getting murdered by the BBC, which we didn't care about because there was no revenue. And you're not going to put your best shows on at Christmas when there's no revenue. We let the BBC have it, but we had to pretend a little bit. John Curry was a bit of window dressing, very expensive, but it was a bit of window dressing. So that's why. And for the BBC, it's crucially important because it's a time, when the BBC can prove to the nation that it has something for everybody, that it can be extremely popular in the highest quality sense, which is what the BBC is about. BBC television is part of Christmas, and that's been the BBC's policy since time immemorial.
And Kate, the BBC's Christmas slogan this year is Christmas time together. It's all about family viewing, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And I think that Michael put it really well. It is that is about collective shared viewing. I always say that as an entertainment controller, I want shows that the 3 Gs will watch, 3 generations come together, children, parents, grandparents, and that's a really hard thing to do, but I think at Christmas the BBC do it really well and have done historically.
Let's watch your first one.
Oh, yeah, SEO Trot, I think.
Oh, a miniature rose. Oh, my absolutist favourite. Well, do tell me, what is the other passion?
I think it's just an example of it's very hard to do new things at Christmas. And SEO Trot is a short story by Roald Dahl about a tortoise, essentially. And I was working as a channel exec there, and I remember they were talking about it, and I said, but, is that going to be a big Christmas drama? You get Judi Dench and Dustin Hoffman to the table, and a great director and a great writer, and you're like, yes. So I think you can try new things at Christmas, but you need the star power. People know Judi Dench doesn't tend to put a foot wrong. She's not going to do something bad. And also that it's quite moving. I think people, I don't know about all of you, but I think people get more emotional at Christmas. I think sort of things get you more, and we all know about the Christmas ads and everything, and it really sort of gets people well up. That's what we want. We don't want everyone crying, but we want people to feel emotion.
Your Christmas ad this year, Wonderland. Slightly controversial this year. I don't know how many people have seen it. It's the very harassed mum who wants to spend time with her teenage son, and she's at work, and then time stops and she's able to spend time with him. Some women have said that that they didn't like it. It made them feel a bit guilty.
Well, do you know, when I watched it, and of course marketing sort of showed it to me, and all I thought was, oh my God, lucky woman, she's got a teenage son that wants to spend time with her, because I've got 3 teenage children, and the idea of them spending any time with me or getting anything more than 1 syllable out of them, or 1 word. So, personally, being very honest, that was my reaction to it. I think it has had an overwhelming positive response, and the people have loved it. And what I find interesting is last year's trail, which I think we've got a clip of, was about, it was an animation, but it was the same principle. It was a working dad.
Yeah.
Remember, it was the girl practicing her dance routine, and the dad just didn't have time for her. And we didn't get any sort of complaints about that. And suddenly it's a mum. It's just the same. It is principally the same story, just a different gender. And then it becomes a bit of a story, and I find that very odd.
Yeah, well, let's have a look at that one.
Very sweet. It still gets you a bit, doesn't it?
It's great.
It's great music track as well. I'm quite obsessive about music, and Kautner, one of my commissioners here today, and she'll tell you that every time I've used something, I'm like, I don't like that music. What's the music? It's all about, everything coming together.
It's extraordinary that we've got people reviewing trailers.
Yeah.
Commercials.
Yes, I
But
know.
these are interesting because they're adverts for the BBC Christmas lineup, and they don't have any content in them. What's that all about?
Because, as we said, it's about how the BBC makes you feel, and the BBC makes you feel joyful and sort of safe, and it's about spending time with family and coming together. And I think that's in the same way that the John Lewis ads and the M&S ads, on the whole, they have a bit of they push some of their products, but it's more about how it makes you feel. And I think that's a really good way to go. I think obviously there'll be different trails with different bundles, but
People have
it's
got
about
Google
the
now,
message.
haven't they, right? So I think most people, if they want to know what's on, they go and ask the internet. So you just want to make them want to be with you.
Yeah.
So was it seeing those ads, the John Lewis ads or the Sainsbury's ads, and seeing what impact they had that made you realise you need to get in on it?
Do you know, I couldn't speak because obviously I wasn't behind the campaigns, but I think it probably did have an influence. But I think certainly that one last year, I think well, I would say it's on BBC, but I think it blew all the competition out of the water. I think it was
sets
just
a mood,
brilliant.
doesn't it? You're changing the mood of your channel.
Yeah.
You're saying that this is a different time of year. This is a special time
of year. But also
it
reflects that the BBC continue that throughout the year. So, the little idents, we've got little groups of people before the things, dancers or sort of fishermen. So that was all about bringing. So that's the other clever thing I think they did, was they started that, but then throughout the whole year, that's been the message. The BBC has got something for everyone.
And why is watching TV, on Christmas Day in particular, such a big thing? I remember meeting a girl at university who was astonished that people watch TV on Christmas Day. And when we said, well, what do you do in your house then? And she said, well, we talk to each other. And what? But it's very odd. So it's a family time, yet you're all sitting there, not speaking, but staring at the telly.
Yeah. I think it goes back to the Queen's speech, doesn't it? The Queen's speech was always at 3:00. So when I was young, growing up in the 70s and 80s, the whole Christmas day was sort of built around that. And you've got to do lunch before the Queen's speech, we've got to watch it. Or if you haven't made it, well, you're going to have to do it later. And then I think everything else gets built around that. And I think it's a combination, I think on ITV and BBC, of treats. So it's a bit, it's a bit like Christmas. I was saying, so when Christmas is all about getting presents, and it's like, oh, the surprise and the treat, and that's amazing. And we get that with all the new stuff coming. And then we do show repeats, but we find that people love a bit of repeats, because actually Christmas is all about tradition and sort of family traditions, and when you go back home you do a lot of things the same way, and I don't, you hate it if your parents change something, like, but we don't do it like that, we do it like this in our house on Christmas. And people want, when I heard that BBC Two was showing the Good Life Christmas special again, I was cock a hoop, because Margot Ledbetter with a sort of Times paper hat on her head, doing the homemade cracker is a great moment, and you want to see it again and again.
Now, you've got some clips from this year's
I've got
Christmas
sneak
lineup.
previews of this year.
Let's have a look.
Very exciting, I know. Yes, I have. So I think the first one we're going to see, Yes. So I don't know if you've all seen All Together Now, which was the new singing show that we brought to the BBC this year. where you have not 4 judges, but 100 judges, all members of the public, but all sort of singing experts in their own right, and members of the public perform for them. And the more people that stand up and join in, the higher your score. So we thought, why don't we do a celebrity version? And what was interesting about the celebrity version, I thought we'd do it as a Christmas special, is that I hadn't quite taken into account how seriously the celebrities would take it. So, and I think it's a tough thing being judged by 100 people, and they, you know, they had lessons and they tried really hard. And let's just say all the performances are not necessarily what you're expecting. So I think this clip needs no words.
Okay. I didn't expect that. She's quite good, isn't
she's
she?
pretty good. Yeah, I can't tell you what happens, but let's see. There's a lot of other very competitive celebrities who come
Can you
up
tell us
behind
any
her.
of the other celebrities who were on it?
Yes, I think I probably can. So we've got Chris Kamara, Alison Hammond, who's on this morning, who gets the 100 going, Omid Dajili, who I think had to sort of be dragged off the stage at the end because I haven't finished yet. And sort of, so it's a really sort of eclectic mix. And Sarah Pascoe is a great stand-up comedian, but it's entertaining stuff, and it's going out on Christmas Eve, which I was really, because the other thing, of course, as a commissioner, is I commission the shows, and then I have to go and butter up scheduling to try and get the good slots. And I was like, please give it a good slot. And it's Christmas Eve, which I'm really pleased about, because I think there are a lot of people in on Christmas Eve doing last-minute wrapping.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I think it's a nice time for it to go out.
And your next one is a comedy drama?
Yeah, so this is from Shane. So Shane Allen is head of comedy, so he commissions all the scripted comedy, and this is called Click and Collect. And what I think is clever about this commission is it's got familiar faces. So the leads are Stephen from The Office, Stephen Merchant, and Asim, who people will know as Chabuddy from People Just Do Nothing. And it is a comedy drama, and it is about 2 men who have to take an unexpected road trip together to find the must-have Christmas present for Stephen's daughter. And it's sort of familiar territory. I don't remember the film with Arnold Schwarzenegger, Jingle All the Way, and then Planes, Trains and Automobiles, amazing Steve and John sort of as the unlikely sort of travel partners. So immediately you're in familiar territory, and you know with someone like Stephen, he's just got funny bones. And this clip sort of sets it up at the beginning, so it's not a sort of big slapstick clip, but you'll see the setup, and you can sort of see what's coming. It's lovely. And then, of course, as you can imagine, of course, he says, no, can't find the unicorn anywhere. And the road trip with Asim, they have to go, I think, to Carlisle, 300 miles away, where Asim has found one. But he needs to use his credit card for Click and Collect. And I just, you know, so you can do new stuff, but I think having a familiar sort of setup and having great talent.
Will that be on BBC One?
Yes, BBC One.
And it's Boxing Day, that one,
yes,
isn't it?
Yeah.
Because on Christmas Day, you haven't really gone for anything new. You've got Call the Midwife. And
Well, Call the Midwife, again, you know, Call the Midwife last year got high ratings than the year before, so I'm always interested in this. Things are dropping, but I think, and I love Call the Midwife. I mean, I love watching drama because I have nothing to do with it. So when you watch entertainment, you tend to sit there and either think, I'm really pissed off because that's really bad and it should be better, or I'm really pissed off because that's really good, but I had nothing to do with it. So, but when you watch drama, I can just sit back and relax. So I think we haven't got new, but we're doing Michael McIntyre on Christmas Day for the first time. He's normally Christmas Eve, and obviously Morecambe and Wise are brilliant, but I think Michael McIntyre is sort of that modern sort of multi-strand variety show, and I think he does it brilliantly. And I actually watched the Christmas app last night, and I was buzzing afterwards, and I think it's a great app. And he's got a new item in that we've never seen before, which works brilliantly. So yes, it's the familiar titles, but I think they're all a bit special on Christmas Day, which is what people want.
And your last clip is Strictly.
Strictly Come Dancing. Who's going to win? Who's going to win? If I get asked that one more time, I'm like, I don't know. The public decide. What do you think? Who's going to win? Can we have a... Stacey. Oh, Stacey. Oh, Stacey or Joe, will it be Joe? There we go. The public have spoken. So the Christmas show, of course, is not the regular competitors. And what we've tended to do with the Christmas show recently is bring back people who've been on it before. and give them a sort of second crack at it. So this will be on Christmas Day. The theme is fairy tales. Anton rung me up just to say, just so you know, I am being paired with Anne Widdecombe and we are ugly sisters. But, you know, bless you, Anton, it's Christmas and I'm glad you're getting into the spirit of it, and he is great. And so is the celebrities being paired, and they do a great sort of Christmas routines. We've got Aston coming back, we've got Karen flying flak on it. There's a really nice sort of mix of competitors. And this is the opening number, which interestingly enough actually follows the same theme as the sort of Christmas campaign we were talking about, which is about someone wanting to spend, the child wanting to spend more time with their parents, although when Strictly sort of conceived this, they didn't know what the campaign was, so it's all just sort of coincidence that it's following the same theme, which is great. Look at those arms. Can't go wrong with Dame Darcy at Christmas.
Can you imagine a Christmas now without Strictly?
No, I can't actually, and I mean, do you know, but I find Strictly fascinating because obviously back in the day, the brilliant sort of Richard Hopkins, who's sadly no longer with us, who used to be my boss, and Karen Smith, who formatted it. I remember at the time everyone thinking a boring dancing show on Saturday nights, and my sister was the celebrity booker, and I remember her ringing me saying, I've got to do this boring dancing show, no one wants to do it, I can't get anyone, because everyone just thought it wouldn't work. And
Bruce told me, God rest his soul, bless him, Bruce told me that he thought it was just going to be taking the piss out of the celebrities, which is what attracted him in the first place. He said he had no idea they were going to take it so seriously and be so good, many of them, and the members of the public. You know, he thought he was in for an hour of just taking the piss out of them.
But if you look at the first episode of Strictly now, it's fascinating because it's even the desk isn't quite big enough for the judges, and there's kind of a red curtain behind them with some fairy lights and things, and it you know, compared to how big it's got, and that's our challenge on Strictly is obviously the public love it, and we don't want to mess around with the format too much, so we make some tweaks, which we've done this year, but you want to keep it the same, but the expectation level goes up every year, so it's trying to keep it at its top of its game, and that I always say that's my job in telly, is to keep the greats great and grow the new greats. And, you know, it's a tricky balance doing that. But you can't take your eye off the ball that we have so many titles in entertainment which are still performing well. So making sure they're in robust health is just as important as finding the new titles.
Now, Kate, we've looked at this year's Christmas. We've looked at Christmases gone by. And you are going to take us on a little journey into the future.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to deliver clips from the future. So in the spirit of Charles Dickens, I would like to tell you a story about an ordinary family and the ghost of Christmas TV yet to come. The pale winter sun was still dragging itself up over the frosty horizon when Isabel and Grace came clattering down the stairs, full of excitement. It's Christmas, the twins chanted in unison. It's early, too early for so much noise, their father David groaned, waving his hand through the holographic display on the kitchen counter to disperse the serious-looking newsreaders. Their mother Sarah laughed. Come on, Mr. Grinch, help the girls get some breakfast while I finish decorating the cake. She turned back to the 3D printer that was just finishing an adorable snowman in crystallized sugar, a blueprint she'd downloaded from her favourite cooking show earlier that day. Grandma is expecting us at midday. 30 minutes later, they were piling into the car, a spacious self-drive sedan with a top-of-the-range AV entertainment suite. Destination Grandma, she told the console. Girls, what do you want to watch? Frozen, they chorused as one. The car pulled smoothly away from its charging bay, the windows going dark and the seats rotating so that they were all facing the rear windscreen, now filled with the opening credits of the old Disney classic. David groaned again as the three women in his life burst into enthusiastic song. Grandma was waiting at the front door. Come through into the kitchen, my darlings. I'm just finishing up preparations for lunch. The hollow display on the kitchen counter was paused, a generously proportioned, dark-haired beauty with full lips, frozen in time with a spoonful of gravy halfway to her mouth. Who's that? Asked Grace. Her father answered. That's a famous TV cook from a very long time ago, Gracie. Her name was Nigella Lawson. It might be old, but it's still the best gravy recipe around. Nigella was quite famous for it, you know, Grandma said, gesturing for the broadcast to continue. The holographic Nigella sucked seductively on the gravy-laden spoon. Delicious. Sarah laughed at her husband's rapt expression. Yes, that's one of the things she was famous for. Do you need a hand carving the turkey, Mum? Oh, no, dear, I'm fine. The BBC Food Channel has a new mixed reality app that shows you how to carve. It's quite wonderful. Look, you just scan the turkey with the app and it shows you exactly where to place the knife. That is useful. Come on, girls, you can help me finish the table decorations while your father helps Grandma watch Nigella. 2 hours and far too much food later, because some things never change, they were sitting back around the dinner table, scoffing chocolates and nuts, as the Queen rose in holographic form out of the middle of the Christmas pudding to deliver the traditional message. Isabel yawned and David surreptitiously used the dressing room applet on his smartwatch to loosen the fit of his belt on his trousers. It had been a marvellous lunch, but they should get the girls home before tiredness spoiled the mood. That evening, the whole family gathered in the living room. I'm going to play Builder Blocks with a live stream on CBeebies, Isabel announced, pinch-zooming the gaming display to open in front of her seat. Alexa, play Home Alone 56, Left in Space, instructed Grace. Her seat rotated to the perfect angle to view her chosen broadcast on the multi-view screen that filled the opposite wall. The holosonic sound system pushed a spotlight of audio to her seat only, so it wouldn't disturb anyone else. David sighed and adjusted his sweatpants, which were much more comfortable than over his distended belly than the blue jeans he'd left on the bathroom floor. Alexa, pick something for me. The intelligent home system scanned David's facial expression, taking a read on his body temperature from his seat. It had hundreds of hours of content preferences to draw from and knew what he'd already watched. It calculated he was exhausted, and given the time of day and the extra weight in his chair, it was likely he'd just eaten a huge meal. He probably wouldn't be awake very long anyway, so the entertainment AI picked out a comedy sketch show, tilting his seat so he could see it clearly on the multi-view screen, and cooling his cushions to make him a bit more comfortable. As the Holosonics audio began at his seat, an advert for post-Christmas gym membership played. He sighed again, wishing he was under 16 and didn't have to watch the targeted ad, which just made him feel fat. Just then, Sarah entered the room. Seeing her family all engaged in their own little worlds, she put a tray of hot chocolate noisily on the coffee table. No, sorry, it's Christmas Day. We're watching a movie together. Alexa, it's family time. The seats all moved on their tracks to bring them together into a large, sprawling sofa, the multi-view screen flattening out to produce a crisp, vibrant picture that filled the whole wall, curving around them to the sides. I'm hungry, Grace complained, reaching for a hot chocolate. Where do you put it? David marvelled, rubbing his belly. Can we have pizza, Mummy? Of course, Angel, Sarah said, drawing her daughter into a hug. Alexa, order family pizzas. The order was received at the Domino's across town, a regiment of robotic kitchen hands throwing, tossing, slicing and grating the toppings as the conveyor carried the bread base through the system to be perfectly cooked and delivered by drone 30 minutes later. Back home, the lights dimmed to the perfect ambience and the family snuggled up together on the perfectly pitched sofas as the opening narration began. Old Marley was as dead as a doornail.
Very clever. Very clever. Very clever.
God, frightening.
Scary.
It's good to know that however far in the future we go, the songs from Frozen will still be going.
The
classics.
And the Crepe Queen.
Yes. But are any of these things within reach? How many years are we talking?
Do you know what? Most of those images that weren't sort of, pictures of scenery, they actually are in existence now. It was William Gibson who said the future's already here, it's just not widely distributed. And actually, we've got a demonstration, I think. There is an augmented reality app, which we're hopefully, if technology is kind to us, we're going to show you. We're using it at the back there, Andrew, which actually allows you, with whoever that is in the audience, you've got a turkey on your head now. But you can actually place that on, I hope you're not a vegetarian. You can place it on your table and it shows you where to cut. Yeah. So we have this technology, it's just a question of it becoming mainstream and affordable, really. That's a large turkey.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And in terms of watching television as a family, you can watch more channels now than ever before. You can watch them on more devices than ever before. And you can see audiences going down as the decades go by.
Yeah.
In 20 or 30 years' time, will people still be watching a family show with all the family together in one room?
Well, I think times like Christmas, it will become really important that we do, that it is that tradition. Christmas is the only time of year I'll flick through the channels and I'll sit down and watch Chitty Chitty Bang Bang or, Mary Poppins. And these old classics, they give you a sense of tradition and good feeling that you remember from childhood. Viewing habits, though, are changing. People are watching live streaming, people want to be part of the broadcast, they don't want a passive linear experience. And I think a lot of broadcasters, are struggling with how they incorporate that into the traditional experience. And it's going to be a mix of hardware and software, but also attitudes, our attitude and changing towards what we expect from the viewing experience. But I hope we'll still get together on Christmas Day and watch the old films as a family, for sure.
Yeah. Kate, do you feel positive about
I do. I feel very positive. I mean, it's interesting, the BBC, that, iPlayer is becoming more and more important. And actually, last year saw iPlayer's biggest week over Christmas. They had over 80 million requests on iPlayer. So people aren't just going for the sort of, the sort of linear experience, and they're releasing a lot of sort of back catalogue and box sets this year, which I think is great. But, last year was a Strictly, we had our highest ratings ever. Call the Midwife is up next year. So I refuse to believe that ratings are going to keep falling each year. I think on Christmas Day, people do want to come together, and I'm hopeful that will continue.
And the great thing about digital platforms is the data that you can get from the way people are watching and what they're enjoying. You can see the moment they turn something off, or the moment they switch channel, or the moment, they sort of, more people come to it. And so we as broadcasters can use that to actually fine-tune even more closely to what our audiences want, the content that we're creating.
Yeah, and consolidated ratings are becoming much more important now. So as you know, the overnight ratings have changed, and now we do look a lot at sort of Live plus 7 and even sort of Live plus 28 now. So the consolidated ratings are amazing, how it can really change.
That face you were making, Michael, was the same face I was making looking at the 4x3 picture screen.
No, I'm just, I just hate anything that leads you towards reading audiences' reactions to not historic show, but last night's TV, and making judgments about what you're going to commission on the basis of what the audience is. The creative, you've got to keep ahead of the audience. If you ask the audience what they like, we like more shows like Strictly, we'd like to watch more shows like Coronation Street, can't we have more shows like? They have no frame of reference, nor should they have. And it's the broadcaster's job to keep ahead of public taste. I'm always nervous about anything to do with data that points you towards some kind of predictive formulaic anticipation of audiences.
And social media is tough. I always tell all the people that we work with and the commissioners, just don't go on Twitter when we launch something new. Because, Twitter, I would say entertainment is the most loved genre and the most criticised genre. And it always has been, always will be, and social media, it's tough.
What we have to realise is, I hope, this is kind of me an optimist. Sorry. My take on it is that audiences in 100 years' time will still have an appetite for stories, for laughter, for emotion, and all the things that television and digital media can provide. All that's changing is the distribution mechanism. It's the way you get it. But people will always have. Stories are as old as prehistoric villages, where the people used to go around and tell stories, and some places they still do. That's what we do. We tell stories. People have an appetite for that. How they consume it is what's changing. But there's no loss of. Look at the amazing explosion in drama, box set drama. It's staggering. But people are hungry for great stories, and they just watch them in a different way. They're not going to wait a week, to watch. It's driving us mad. Mrs. Wilson's driving us mad.
I like that phase.
We've watched. Of course. Anticipation is everything, they tell me.
Yes.
But it is. our hunger for stories.
I think that is, I think it was interesting with The Bodyguard that was such a success, and I don't think it would have been such a huge show if it had all been released at once. I think it was the point that people were talking about it, and is she alive, is she dead, and waiting for the next step. It was the anticipation of it.
I'm watching it at the moment.
Oh, sorry.
I can't wait for Mrs. Wilson.
Yeah.
We're going to throw it open to questions from the audience soon, but before that, you've got 2 final clips that you want to show us. You have?
Yes. Yes. When I was at Channel 4, you know, what the hell do you do at Christmas if you're at Channel 4? I mean, all we could do is make trouble and try to do something that was outrageous. And we had the idea of the alternative Queen's message, which really excited the Daily Mail. In ways that they don't often get excited, and we've got one of those, I think, haven't we?
Let's have a look
This
at
is
the
the
one you've
alternative
chosen.
Queen's message on Channel 4.
The end of the year is a period of hope and rebirth. That is why I am sincerely delighted to be able to talk for all those who do not have the power of speech.
Well,
Brigitte Bardot.
was she your choice?
No, somebody in Channel 4. Right. I never knew her. I had a client, Sacha Distel, once as an agent who knew her very well, but I didn't know her. But it was fun. I can't remember who else we did, but it was always scurrilous.
Sometimes they were serious, weren't they? And sometimes
Yeah.
they were more fun.
Of course, there's a point to it, and there's a serious message. It's not comedy, but it's just the idea of Channel 4. You know,
They still do it. Yeah. Yeah.
Do they?
Yeah, yeah. Still, they're doing it again this year.
Oh,
so, you know, it continues.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for your final clip, is this the best of Christmas TV?
This is sublime. It doesn't get any better than this, and it's, of course, Morecambe and Wise, who I had the pleasure of working with, not in television, but as an agent, worked with Eric and Ernie, and this is as good as it can possibly be.
I'm playing all the right notes, but not necessarily in the right order.
Just brilliant.
In the lead up to that, in the setup of that sketch, I always watch for the moment. They broke a cardinal rule, the boys, when they booked Andre Previn, because he couldn't give them very much rehearsal time, and they would turn down Laurence Olivier, whoever it was, if they couldn't get the rehearsal time that they felt they needed to make the sketch work. And they had such a good idea to do this, and Andre Previn was clearly the man, but he couldn't come till very late, so they had very, very, very short, for them, very short rehearsal time, and they were desperately worried about whether he could carry it off on the night. And when they do the setup on the stage before they move to the piano, I always watch Eric's face when Andre Previn says, "All right, I'll do it. I'll just go and get my baton." And Eric or Ernie says, "Where is it?" And Andre Previn says, "It's in Chicago," which gets a massive laugh. But he times it to such perfection, Previn, and you see Eric's eyes go, "Oh, it's going to be all right. Yeah. It's going to be good." And that's the moment I always look for. And of course it was, I mean, it's the stuff of legend. I mean, I don't think show business gets any better.
No, it doesn't. On that note, we can open it up for a few minutes that we have left. There's an eager man in the front row. I don't know if we have a mic or if you just have... Oh, yeah, there's a man behind you.
Fantastic. You're right, absolutely, Sir Michael. You've fantastic stuff about this stuff in terms of what Eric and Ernie used to be. What happens now in the current non-PC time, where you're taking that whole sort of slightly edgy bit out? Do you think we've lost a little bit of the humour? Are we now sort of stopping from doing the more exciting stuff?
No, I think you can find all kinds of... I mean, I would say that in the tradition of Eric and Ernie, I would say that Peter Kay, he's got different skills, of course, but he is a supreme artist who has the widest possible appeal. His material, as far as I've ever seen, is very clean and family oriented. He's clever, he's funny, he's a natural clown, he's a brilliant actor, a brilliant writer. I mean, Car Share was just absolutely, you know, just so original and brilliant. So it's whatever you fancy. There's all kinds of, you know, Eddie Izzard, who doesn't do much TV these days. He's sort of given up being a comic. He wants to be a sort of serious actor. But,
Yes.
you know, have I got news for you? It's, you know,
Yeah,
still hilarious.
Yeah, and you know, Peter Kay, I mean, you're right, Car Share, they got away with a whole storyline about dogging, and it was rather amazing they did, but it was brilliant. And certainly for us at Christmas, I think Mrs. Brown's Boys, I think he sails pretty close to the wind on that, and he sort of gets away with murder.
It's beyond the wind.
But yeah, but people love it, so you sort of. I always think that, there's that old quote that indifference is the enemy, not contempt.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd rather do stuff that people are talking about than just not caring about. So I think Mrs. Brown is a great example of still being edgy and getting away with it. People like it.
I do a so-called masterclass at the National Film and Television School, and I was given an episode of something, and we spent 3 hours taking it apart. And I thought, just for the hell of it, I'll give them Mrs. Brown's Boys. And I thought they're going to hate this. Yeah. They loved it. They were absolutely, they were riveted by it.
Do we have fans of Mrs. Brown's Boys in here?
Three.
Three, okay.
Isn't it wonderful? Every generation's got a female impersonator. Yeah. You know, going back to Mrs. Shufflewick, Danny LaRue,
Dick Emery.
Dick Emery, and now.
And it shows out Mrs. Brown, actually, and also we do all round to Mrs. Brown's as well, is apart from Strictly, I think it is the most oversubscribed record, people wanting seats. Really? Thousands of applicants for each seat for Mrs. Brown. His following is massive.
It's quite a radical show. Breaking the fourth wall.
Yes.
Is quite revolutionary in comedy. I mean, it's a traditional kind of carry-on type sitcom.
Yeah.
And this Christmas it's on twice.
Yes, which was last year as well. But what I think Brendan O'Carroll is a brilliant man. What he does very cleverly on that show is it's quite rude, it's quite slapstick, but he always does this quite sort of moving sort of epilogue at the end where he sort of talks about family, and it's going right back to those brilliant sort of Only Fools and Horses episodes where you had all the slapstick, but then there was still stuff that sort of got you.
Absolutely, that's his great redeeming quality is the family. They're all employees, all his family's employed.
All employed on the show, yeah.
Does anybody else have a question for the panel?
Yes, it's just a question for the panel, probably for our lady looking at Christmas future. How does Reed Hastings celebrate Christmas? Should we be worried? How does Reed Hastings celebrate Christmas, and should we be worried? Thank you.
That's the Netflix CEO. We don't know.
Oh, right. He probably sits and counts his money, to be honest with you. Yeah, I mean, Netflix is, it's an absolute beast that we all have to contend with, and you know, I think it's indicative of the changing attitude of young people who have this 24/7 relationship with the world. They want it when they want it. But I think, as Kate said, you know, you can release box sets, but actually, when you drip feed them and you don't give everyone the whole box set together, that's when you get the real kind of excitement. Nothing can really replace that cliffhanger moment of waiting for the 10 o'clock episode to see what happened to Ange and Dirty Den. You don't get that with a sort of like all you can eat all at once box set. So I think they're different audiences. I'm going to be binging some box sets over Christmas, I have to say, but I'm going to be watching.
What are you going to be watching? What are you binging?
Well, at the moment, I'm playing catch up on The Bodyguard. Yeah. I've also recently discovered how to get away with murder, which I really enjoyed. Yeah. So I'm kind of into that at the moment. But I'm probably going to be watching quite a lot of sort of live streaming on Twitch and interacting with my friends and stuff as well. So I like to do all of it. But
has anybody found the Kozeminski method on Netflix?
No. Right, so that's another one too.
Michael Douglas and Alan Arkin.
Wow.
It's just half hour. It's slightly indulgent. It's very Hollywood, but it is just genius acting. A whole episode about his prostate is just magic.
Talking about Netflix makes me think about Christmas films. In the 70s and the 80s, the 3 o'clock BBC or ITV Christmas film was massive. It was a premiere.
But the films
there was
are now,
nowhere else you could watch them.
Well, the films are now played out. I mean, they've had so many windows and they've been so available that there's, you know, we would save the first ever broadcast transmission, television transmission of The Sound of Music or Gone with the Wind, which we used to pay a fortune for. We'd save that for Christmas Day, Christmas afternoon. But the movies just don't do any business anymore.
I mean, you still do a film at 3 o'clock.
No, at BBC they do business, and there's definitely
Christmas.
There's Christmas bundles just for the film offerings, and.
But you don't run movies in prime time.
Not well.
I'm not talking about Christmas.
No,
the rest
yes,
of
not in the rest of but at Christmas,
Well,
you know,
always
when
used
the
to
kind of all those sort of what are prime slots all goes out of the window a bit, and it's all a bit different. But I was talking to Dana, my friend who was here from Disney, and we were saying that BBC has got Mary Poppins this year. Now, you may think, well, Mary Poppins, we've all seen it, but it's the only broadcaster that's showing Mary Poppins, and with Mary Poppins Returns coming to the cinema, which some of you may be fortunate enough to see. I saw a preview of it, and actually, it's a huge homage to the original. And as soon as you see the Returns, you want your children to see the original again. So this is really clever. So actually, I think Mary Poppins will do great business.
Can we have an audience participation?
Only place in the world, Dana says, that is showing Mary Poppins this Christmas.
Can we have an audience participation moment where we do Dick Van Dyke's line? Blimey, Mary.
Yeah.
That's like Marlene Dietrich in Witness for the Prosecution. What's your ducky?
She didn't say it.
And Tony Curtis in some old medieval film, he says, "Yonder lies the castle of my father."
Now, one thing, Kate, I have to ask you about, because I saw a preview of it last week, is Watership Down.
You're
showing Watership
Down.
The most traumatising film of anybody's childhood.
Is
and
it
you're
animation
doing it again.
Yes,
it's animation.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Yeah, no, it's
Is it the original? Or?
No, it's an updated version with
remake.
with very famous people doing the voices and everything.
rap
So it's a
and stuff,
remake.
is it, or-
But have you seen? So you've seen it, and is it as traumatic as the first one?
No, not quite. But I
Okay.
think you might still have the mistake of parents thinking, oh, there's a cartoon about rabbits. I'll put my 5-year-old in front of that. And then for the next 40 years, they'll be traumatised by it.
I don't know that, because I think if it's a great story, and the parents and grandparents remember it from the first time around, so I think most people will know it, and so there will be some sort of shared warning there of what's to come. But it's a bit like they've just done a new version of Dumbo, haven't they? And they say that is incredibly. People forget that Dumbo's mum dies, and people are like, oh my God, it's awful. But I think actually. You want those sort of emotive so I think it's quite good. I don't think you want a lovely, safe film where it's all going to be lovely. I think you want something that takes in a bit of a journey.
Walt Disney knew that. I mean, Walt Disney understood that in all his great
Bambi. I mean,
great
there's
films.
a lot of trauma in Disney films.
The cruelty of life and the sadness of life is the truth of storytelling, and Walt Disney absolutely understood that.
Yeah.
When it's late at night, you've been at your families all day, you've eaten too much food, your clothes don't fit anymore, you've drunk too much mulled wine, you want a good cry in front of the television.
Straw dogs, that's what we want.
Yeah.
Mince pies and straw dogs.
I love it, you're a straw dog.
And on that note, I think we're coming towards the end of our session. So I want to thank all of our panel. I want to thank Jamie and Susie, who put together all of these clips for us brilliantly.
Yes,
thank you very much.
Thank
you. And Kate, would you like to have the last word on Christmas TV?
Well, I don't think I should. I brought a friend along. So we've been discussing what we would like to watch on Christmas Day, but I brought my little friend, Alexa, here. Alexa, what do you like to watch on Christmas Day?
Thank you, everyone, very much.
Very good.